The air over the city of Fairpoint was unnaturally still. Once a proud symbol of American independence, complete with soaring skyscrapers, wide avenues, and the ringing echoes of freedom, Fairpoint now stood silent, choked by creeping vines, abandoned cars, and the rusting skeletons of what used to be a thriving civilization. A thick fog drifted through the empty streets, curling around lampposts and shattered windows like a living thing. Somewhere deep within the mist, something stirred. Captain Alara Rowe crouched behind a flipped-over Humvee, her rifle steady in her hands and her eyes scanning the street ahead. She wore the last remnants of the Homeland Watch uniform, tattered, mud-streaked, but still bearing the Silver Eagle insignia on her shoulder. Her breath was calm, controlled. She was listening. Beside her, Marcus Wynne adjusted the settings on his makeshift thermal scanner. Movement, 3 figures. Slow gait. Northwest alley. Alara nodded. Could be scouts. Could be shadows. Marcus stiffened. Shadows? Don't say that. They're a myth. Alara gave him a sideways glance. So were the undead, once. The term shadows had started as a rumor, strange zombie-like figures that didn't shamble like the rest of the horde. They moved with intelligence. They whispered before they attacked. And worst of all, they disappeared into thin air before anyone could track them. At first, command brushed off the reports as nerves. Soldiers cracking under pressure. Civilians mistaking sound echoes. But then, entire outposts began to vanish. Not overrun, vanish. No blood, no broken barriers. Just silence. Fairpoint was one of the last strongholds before the Pacific Wall. If shadows were real, and they'd breached this far inland, it meant the entire western line was compromised. Alara held up her fist. Visual. Stay low. Through the mist, 3 humanoid forms emerged from the alley. But something about them was wrong. They didn't drag their feet. Their heads turned, slowly, deliberately. One of them crouched and sniffed the air. They're tracking, Alara whispered. Back. Quiet. But it was already too late. A high-pitched screech, like tearing metal filtered through static, pierced the fog. The creatures snapped their heads toward the sound, then toward the humans. They know, Marcus hissed. Run. The 2 of them broke cover, sprinting across the cracked pavement as the creatures gave chase. The silence of the city shattered instantly, rusted metal clanged, crows burst from rooftops, and the haunting echo of shrieks bounced off the buildings. They rounded a corner and ducked into a crumbling bookstore. Alara slammed the door shut and dragged a filing cabinet in front of it. Marcus panted. What were those? I think we just saw our first shadows. From above, a creaking floorboard drew their attention. A girl, no older than 17, peeked over the railing of the mezzanine. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, but her grip on the crossbow was steady. You led them here, she said softly. Alara raised her hands. We didn't mean to. We're Homeland Watch. Captain Alara Rowe. This is Marcus. We're not infected. The girl narrowed her eyes. Doesn't matter. If they're tracking you, they're tracking us now. What's your name? Alara asked. Juno. Juno, do you have an exit? She nodded toward the back. Basement tunnel. It connects to the metro line. But it's not safe. Something's down there. Alara didn't hesitate. Something worse than what's out here. Juno didn't answer. They moved quickly. Juno led them down a narrow staircase into the darkness. The basement smelled of mold, rot, and old paper. At the far wall, a hole had been dug through the concrete, revealing a tight passage reinforced with wooden beams. Alara flicked on her flashlight. The beam flickered and then steadied. Keep quiet. Weapons ready. They crept through the tunnel in silence, the only sound the drip of moisture from above. The metro station opened into view, partially collapsed, but still passable. That's when they heard the voice. Not groaning. Not growling. A voice. Whispering. Ilara. She froze. Did you hear that? Marcus paled. It said your name. Juno's crossbow snapped up, aiming toward the shadows. A figure stepped into the flickering emergency light of the platform. It wore a human face, intact, expressive, but its eyes were black, swirling with something unnatural. You don't belong here anymore, it said. Dead America belongs to us now. Ilara raised her rifle. Then we'll take it back. The figure gave a faint, cold smile. Then it disappeared. Not ducked. Not ran. Vanished, like smoke in a breeze. And somewhere deeper in the tunnels, more footsteps approached. Not shuffling. Marching. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of part 1. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, and I'll continue the suspenseful journey. The footsteps grew louder, measured, precise. Not like the undead Ilara had faced before. These sounded disciplined, coordinated. It reminded her of something she had almost forgotten, formation drills from the academy. But these weren't soldiers. She signaled Marcus and Juno to fall back behind the rusted ticket booth. They crouched low, holding their breaths as the noise approached. The flickering red emergency light above the platform painted the tunnel in eerie pulses. From the far end of the tunnel, shapes began to emerge, 5 of them. Each moved with mechanical stillness, heads turning in sync. They wore remnants of what looked like civilian clothing, torn hoodies, faded jackets, but their faces weren't entirely human anymore. Some had half-dissolved features, others had grayish skin like wax, stretched tight over bone. But all of them had the same hollow, black eyes. And they weren't shambling. They were searching. Ilara whispered, "They're hunting." Eyes open. Weapons up. Juno trembled, trying to steady her crossbow. Why do they look like that? They don't smell like rot. Marcus tapped his scanner. Thermals useless. They're cold. No heat signature. That sent a chill down Ilara's spine. No heat meant no heart, no blood flow. Yet they moved with purpose. Suddenly, one of the creatures stopped. Its head tilted slightly, as if sniffing the air. It turned slowly, toward their hiding place. Scatter. Ilara ordered. The creature let out a piercing shriek, not just a scream, but something that vibrated deep into the walls, like sonar. Instantly, the others turned in unison and charged. Gunfire echoed as Ilara unleashed a burst from her rifle, taking one down with a shot through the eye. But instead of collapsing in a heap, it stiffened, and exploded into ash. What the? Marcus shouted, diving behind a pillar as another lunged. Juno fired her crossbow. The bolt struck its chest. It stumbled, but didn't fall. It hissed, reached up, and pulled the bolt out as if it were nothing. These aren't normal, Juno cried, backing away. Ilara swung her weapon toward the ceiling. Marcus. Light. Marcus understood instantly. He grabbed a flare from his belt and slammed it against the wall. The tunnel lit up in blazing red. The moment the light touched the creatures, they recoiled, screeching, shielding their faces. They hate the light. Marcus shouted. One bolted back into the shadows, vanishing into the tunnel walls. Another tried to climb onto the ceiling to avoid the flare's glow, but Ilara shot it mid-climb. Ash again. In the chaos, the 5th one hesitated. Just for a second. Its head tilted. Ilara, it rasped. Her blood ran cold. That voice, it wasn't random. It was familiar. It stepped closer, into the flare's light for a brief moment. Her eyes widened. No. It was a face she recognized. Lieutenant Dane McAllister, her second in command. The last time she'd seen him was during the fall of Outpost Echo. He'd stayed behind to buy her team time to escape. He'd died. She was sure of it. But here he was. Pale, hollow-eyed, and whispering her name. Elara, you left us. Then he was gone. Not running. Vanishing into smoke, like the first one. The tunnel fell silent again. The red light of the flare fizzled out slowly, casting them back into dimness. None of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Juno whispered, "That thing knew your name." Elara swallowed hard. "It wasn't a thing. It was someone I used to command." "You said he died." "He did." Marcus looked between them. "What are we dealing with here? Zombies don't talk. They don't remember. And they sure don't stalk people using old memories." Elara straightened, her voice grim. "This is something else. These aren't the mindless infected we're used to. They're evolving, or something's guiding them." Juno pointed to the platform door. "That tunnel leads out of the metro. But it's a long way underground. If we're going to make it out, we need to move, now." Elara nodded. "Let's go. But we don't run blind anymore. These things, shadows, whatever they are, they're watching. Learning. And they remember." As they stepped through the tunnel door, Marcus hesitated. "You think Dane was turned?" "I think," Elara said, her voice low, "Dead America isn't just crawling with the undead anymore." She turned her rifle's flashlight on and led the way into the next chamber, deeper into the dark. From high above, unseen through the concrete layers, something else stirred. Something ancient. And it was listening. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of part 2. Let me know when you're ready for part 3. The tension and mystery will keep building. The tunnel twisted and sloped downward, swallowing Elara, Marcus, and Juno in thick shadows as they pressed deeper into the forgotten metro station. Their footsteps echoed softly off cracked tiles and rusted rails. The stale air was heavy with dust and the faint metallic scent of old blood, relics of battles past. Elara's flashlight scanned ahead, barely cutting through the darkness. Every shadow seemed alive, every whisper magnified. She knew the dangers weren't just outside but lurking in every corner beneath the city. The shadows, those silent hunters, were no ordinary undead. They were something far worse, remnants of humanity twisted by something beyond infection. "Stay close," Elara whispered. "We don't know what's waiting in the tunnels." Marcus adjusted his backpack, gripping a worn map of the metro system. "The nearest safe zone is supposed to be at Junction Delta, about 2 miles from here. If we can make it, there might be other survivors." Juno's crossbow was ready, eyes darting nervously. 2 miles underground. It's a long way to safety. Their path was suddenly interrupted by a low rumble. The ground beneath them vibrated, then shook. Dust rained down from the cracked ceiling. "What now?" Marcus muttered, eyes wide. A section of the tunnel ahead collapsed with a thunderous crash, blocking their way. Elara cursed under her breath. "We'll have to find another route." Juno pointed to a narrow maintenance shaft leading off to the side. "This could be our way around. It's tight, but it might get us through." Without hesitation, Elara led them into the shaft, squeezing past rusted pipes and hanging cables. The air grew colder and damper. The silence was oppressive. Suddenly, a faint noise, soft footsteps, echoed behind them. Elara froze. "Did you hear that?" Marcus nodded. "Someone's following us." "Or something," Juno said, gripping her crossbow tighter. They quickened their pace. The shaft narrowed even more, forcing them to move single file. Then, from the darkness behind, a whisper floated through the stale air. Elara. Elara spun, rifle raised. The beam of her flashlight caught a figure slipping through the shadows. No, not slipping. Gliding. It was Lieutenant Dane McAllister again. His black eyes glistened with a cold hunger, but this time there was something else, faint traces of recognition, a flicker of the man he once was. Elara, he said softly, voice strained. Help me. Conflicted, Elara hesitated. This was the man who saved her life. The man now trapped in something unholy. Dane, she whispered. I don't know if I can. He took a slow step forward, his hand reaching out. There's a way to end this. But I need you to trust me. Before she could answer, a sudden crash from the other end of the shaft startled them both. Shadows were coming. Dane's face twisted in pain. They're coming for me, for all of us. Elara took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Then we fight. Together. As the first shadow appeared in the dim light, Elara fired. The battle underground had just begun, and it was far from over. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of Part 3. When you're ready, I'll keep the suspense rising with Part 4. The narrow maintenance shaft echoed with gunfire and the sharp twang of Juno's crossbow bolts piercing the stale air. Shadows moved with unnatural speed, weaving through the tight space as Elara, Marcus, and Juno fought back to back. Their breaths came in ragged bursts, each heartbeat counting down to an unseen fate. Lieutenant Dane McAllister, pale and fragile-looking, was no longer the man Elara remembered. His movements were jerky, as if his own body resisted the control of the dark force inside him. Yet, at times, his eyes flickered with a spark of the old soldier's resolve. Elara, the core, Dane rasped between strained breaths. It's in the city's heart, the power source. If we can destroy it, the shadows lose control. Marcus's eyes widened. You mean the old power plant? It's been offline since the blackout. Yes, Dane said weakly. But something reactivated it. Feeding the infection, the control, keeping them alive, growing. Juno tightened her grip on her crossbow. Then we have a mission. Destroy the core, break the link. Suddenly, the shaft shook violently. A deafening roar filled the tunnel as a massive figure crashed through a side wall, a grotesque fusion of flesh and shadow, towering over them with glowing red eyes. Elara, fall back. Marcus shouted, firing at the beast's head. Bullets bounced off as if it were armor. Dane staggered, struggling against the creature's influence. You have to finish this. With a fierce cry, Elara raised her rifle and fired a precise shot at a glowing pulsating mark on the creature's chest. It howled, staggering backward before dissolving into a cloud of dark mist. The silence that followed was heavy, but brief. We don't have much time, Elara said, voice resolute. The longer we wait, the stronger they get. The trio pushed forward through the labyrinth beneath the dead city, each step taking them closer to the heart of the nightmare that had consumed their land. Above ground, the streets were silent, the skyline littered with broken memories. Dead America, once a beacon of hope and freedom, now lay shrouded in shadows darker than any night. But Elara still held on to one hope, that somewhere in the ruins, a spark of light remained. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of Part 4. Ready for Part 5? The story is about to get even more intense. The corridor ahead opened into a vast underground chamber, illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights that hummed faintly overhead. The old power plant's control room, forgotten for years, now hummed with an unnatural energy. Machines long dormant blinked back to life, their screens displaying cryptic codes and glowing graphs. Elara's pulse quickened. This was it, the source feeding the shadow's terrible power. Marcus stepped forward, scanning the room. If Dane's right, shutting down this system could cripple the whole operation. Juno eyed the control panels warily. But how do we do that? It looks ancient, but somehow, alive. Dane, leaning heavily against the wall, struggled to focus. There's a central reactor. We need to overload it. But it won't be easy, there are defenses. As if on cue, the lights flickered and dimmed. From the dark corners of the room, shadows began to emerge, more advanced, faster, and coordinated. Unlike before, they moved like soldiers, surrounding the trio with silent menace. Elara raised her rifle. We're not walking out without a fight. The battle erupted in a storm of movement and noise. Bullets rang out, bolts whistled through the air, and the stale scent of burnt circuitry filled the chamber. Dane struggled to maintain his clarity, fighting the dark force that threatened to consume him completely. Go for the reactor, he urged, gasping. I'll hold them off. Elara hesitated, torn between helping Dane and completing their mission. But time was running out. With Marcus covering her, Elara sprinted toward the massive reactor unit. Sparks flew as she yanked open the panel and began to manipulate the controls, her fingers moving quickly despite the pressure. Behind her, the sounds of battle intensified. Juno's crossbow echoed sharply, and Dane's voice grew weaker. Then, a massive shadow crashed into Marcus, sending him sprawling. Elara's heart pounded as she glanced back. Dane was on the ground, his eyes flickering between humanity and darkness. Come on, she muttered, overriding the system's safeguards. Suddenly, alarms blared. The reactor began to overload, its core glowing a blinding white. Elara shouted to Marcus and Juno, "Get out! Now!" They fled the chamber just as the reactor erupted in a controlled explosion, the shockwave knocking them to the floor as darkness consumed the underground world. As dust settled, the trio crawled out of the collapsed ruins, the first faint light of dawn breaking over the ruined skyline of dead America. Elara looked back toward the city, hope flickering within her. The battle wasn't over, but they had struck a blow. And in the shadows beyond, something stirred, watching, waiting for its next move. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of part 5. Let me know when you want part 6. The story is getting even more gripping. Dawn painted the cracked skyline of dead America with a cold, pale light. The city, once vibrant and full of life, now lay silent, scarred by battle and shadow. Elara, Marcus, and Juno emerged from the rubble of the underground reactor, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. Despite the destruction they'd wrought beneath the city, the battle above was far from finished. Elara's gaze swept the horizon. The streets, eerily quiet moments ago, now flickered with movement, shadows shifting and creeping from broken windows, dark figures gathering like a storm waiting to break. The shadows are regrouping, Marcus said grimly. That reactor blast set them back, but it didn't end them. Juno checked her weapons, her jaw tight. If they're coming, we need a plan. This city isn't safe anymore. As they moved cautiously through deserted streets, a sudden sharp whistle cut through the morning air. From the rooftops, a group of survivors appeared, armed and alert, their faces worn but resolute. We've been watching, their leader said, a tall woman with fierce eyes. You did what we couldn't. That blast bought us time. But it's not enough. The shadows are evolving. They learn. Elara nodded, understanding the weight behind those words. What's next? How do we stop them for good? The woman's gaze hardened. We find the source of the corruption. There's a place deep in the city's old government district, where it all started. If we can destroy the core of the infection there, we might have a chance to reclaim this land. A chill ran through Elara as she thought of the shadows lurking beneath the ruins, the dark power still pulsing like a heartbeat in the city's veins. We'll need more allies, Marcus added. We can't do this alone. The survivors nodded in agreement. The fight to reclaim dead America was becoming a fight for survival itself, a war not just against the undead but against a creeping darkness that threatened to consume everything. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the broken streets, Elara felt the weight of the fight ahead settle on her shoulders. But with allies by her side, and a mission that could turn the tide, she allowed herself one moment of hope. The land that once knew freedom was broken, but it was not yet dead. And neither were its defenders. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of Part 6. When you're ready, I'll continue with Part 7, where the tension escalates and secrets unfold. Night fell again over dead America, but this time, the darkness felt different, charged with an uneasy tension that hung in the air like a storm about to break. Elara, Marcus, Juno, and the new group of survivors moved cautiously through the skeletal remains of the government district, where cracked marble steps and toppled columns whispered of a forgotten era. The streets were eerily quiet. No distant moans or shuffling feet. Only the soft crunch of their boots against broken glass and rubble. "Why is it so quiet?" Juno whispered, her crossbow ready. Elara's gaze swept the shadowed windows and alleys. "Because they're waiting." As they approached a massive, abandoned city hall building, the group stopped. The heavy doors were sealed with thick metal bars, but behind them, a faint, pulsating glow leaked through the cracks. Dane, still struggling with the dark force inside him, stepped forward, his voice a hoarse whisper. "This is it. The origin. The source of the infection's power." Marcus studied the glowing light. "We've come too far to turn back now." With coordinated effort, they forced the doors open, the sound of metal scraping against metal echoing like a war drum. Inside, the room was transformed. Ancient technology fused with alien-like biomechanical growths crawled along the walls and floor. At the center pulsed a massive core, a living mass of light and shadow intertwined, a heart of corruption feeding the darkness. Suddenly, from the shadows, a chilling voice spoke. "Welcome, survivors." From behind the core emerged a figure clad in dark armor, face obscured by a visor that reflected the core's eerie light. His presence radiated control and menace. "I am the architect," he declared. "The mind behind the shadows, the force that will reshape this land." Elara's heart pounded. This was no mindless monster, they faced a calculating enemy, one who had orchestrated the nightmare. "We won't let you win," she said fiercely. "This land was once free, and it will be again." The architect laughed, a cold, metallic sound. "Then prove it. Fight for your freedom, if you can." The chamber plunged into chaos as the core's tendrils lashed out, pulling shadows from hidden corners and twisting the environment into a shifting maze of traps and darkness. The final battle for dead America was about to begin. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of Part 7. Part 8 awaits, ready for the thrilling conclusion? The chamber twisted and writhed around them, shadows surging like living waves. Elara tightened her grip on her rifle, eyes locked on the enigmatic figure known only as the architect. His power pulsed from the core, twisting reality itself, threatening to consume everything they fought for. "Hold your ground," Marcus shouted, firing at the advancing shadows that emerged from every crack and corner. Juno's crossbow sang sharply, felling enemies with practiced precision. Elara sprinted toward the core, dodging tendrils of dark energy that lashed out like serpents. Dane, though weakened, struggled beside her, his internal battle raging with every step. "This ends now," Elara whispered, pressing a detonator she had taken from the reactor's remains. "For dead America." The core's glow flared, blinding and fierce, as the architect unleashed a final wave of fury. But the survivors held firm, standing united against the darkness. Explosions rocked the chamber as the core began to collapse in on itself. The architect screamed, a sound twisted by rage and despair, before vanishing into the collapsing shadows. When the dust settled, silence fell. The oppressive darkness lifted. The surviving survivors looked around at the ruined chamber, their faces illuminated by the first true light of dawn in what felt like an eternity. Ilara exhaled deeply, the weight of the fight easing for the first time. Dead America was battered but alive. The shadows that once threatened to consume it had been pushed back. Freedom was not guaranteed, but it was reclaimed, if only for now. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would remember. Because even in the darkest times, the human spirit burns brightest. And once a land of freedom, now scarred but unbroken, Dead America still had a future worth fighting for. Black lozenge, black lozenge, black lozenge. End of Part 8. If you want, I can help craft intros, outros, or even promotional snippets for your YouTube videos based on this story.